But did you go to school for journalism, or were you on some different trajectory?
No, I think I always knew that I wanted to be a part of journalism. I went to WSU, graduated from the Murrow School, and I was very excited about my career. I always believed that TV is, and I still believe that TV is where people turn when something big happens. You know, you can always find something online, you can always find it in the paper, you can always hear it on the radio, but there's something special about TV, and I still believe that. Even as things have changed in 23 years since I started doing this, I still believe that it's where people want to turn to watch what's happening in the world.
Some big things that you remember turning to in the TV, whether it's in your childhood or later on. What big things come to mind? Because I can think of probably 5 right now.
Oh yeah, well 9/11 is one of the big ones, of course, we all remember that. I remember when Princess Di died. That was a big deal. I think I was in high school, and I remember just sitting down to watch it, and I think the whole world did that. Just the same as when 9/11 happened, just the same. There have been lots of weather events, you know, all sorts of things. When fires came through here, we all turned to the TV.
And so you knew going into school, you picked WSU, which obviously we have so many people who came up through that program. Yeah. Proud to be a Coug.
Proud to be a Coug, always.
And then where did you go?
My first job was in Bismarck, North Dakota. I had never been anywhere so cold in my whole life. I spent 3 years there, and it was, you know, it was formative for me. I was really lucky at the station that I landed. You know, it's a capital. Bismarck is a state capital, so I got to talk regularly with the governor and the first lady and the attorney general, and I really learned how to do journalism. You know, you learn in school the concept of it, and then your first job is where you go to actually figure out how it all works. And then I moved to Youngstown, Ohio. I spent 5 years there, and then I decided that it was time to come back to the Northwest. My family was here. I had been away for a long time. I ended up in the Tri-Cities for 2 years, and when I was there, I knew that Spokane is where I wanted to be. And so I set my sights on Spokane. And then I've been here now for 12 years, almost 13.
KREM brought you home?
KREM definitely brought me home, and it is still home. It is still home.
You talk a lot about your family, and you're a Northwest girl.
I am.
Through and through.
Yep.
Did making it to where you wanted to be match the ideal of it?
It did. You know, along the way, you kind of realize this job is not nearly as glamorous as some people think it is. It's really hard, and it's not very glamorous 99% of the time, but it was rewarding. And so, you know, I always wanted to be back here in the Northwest. I never needed to go to the network. I just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to work my way up, and I was able to do that here in a place that opened the door to me and gave me opportunity, and I'm just so grateful.
So when you got to KREM, hit the ground running, full-time reporter?
I was a full-time reporter. Well, I guess I did weekend anchoring as well. I started as a weekend anchor, and then I started doing more and more investigative reporting. Right off the bat, you know, at the time, our news director, Noah Cooper, he really kind of empowered me to go do big stories. And that was something, I had never been at a station that just let you do that. And let me have all sorts of time, lots of time. And in television, you usually don't get very much time. And I got so much time to do really big, important stories. You know, the Carlton Complex fire in 2014 was one of the first really big stories that I did that I covered for years and years afterward. And it was such an interesting story to cover because we shed light on things that had happened to people that nobody else would talk about. No one else would let them be heard. And it was such a privilege to hear their stories, to be able to amplify it and let people know what had happened. There were things that happened that shouldn't have, and they don't happen anymore. And it wasn't all me, but I do think that I was a part of at least telling people what had been happening. And these people had never been listened to before.
And so you have, and we'll go back to some of the big stories that you covered, but you become connected in your way to communities.
Laura, don't do it.
Too late.
That was a really special story for me. I think I was like so many other people who didn't get it before. And then I started talking to all these people and really understanding what they had lost, and I got it. And other people needed to get it too. They needed to understand. And so I shared really hard stories. People lost things that can never be replaced. And it was hard to hear this thing that they went through. This shouldn't have happened. It just shouldn't have. It didn't have to happen that way. And they put so much trust in me to tell this story. I never forgot what a privilege that was.
I think as a reporter, that is always something that I think I feel or know or understand better than, say, somebody who isn't in it.
Yeah.
That when people tell their story, that is truly an honor.
It is.
Because they're trusting you with some of the best and worst moments of their life.
They're being vulnerable. They are vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable and you feel vulnerable, you want to close off and you don't want to seem vulnerable. And these people were willing to talk to me. They were willing to bring me into their lives and show me. Every time I went up there, and I made so many trips to Pateros and Okanagan County, there are still people that I'm friends with who live there that I only know because of what happened. And they trusted me to be vulnerable. And that's just something that doesn't happen every day. It just isn't.
You are always very careful, especially in those moments like the Highland family, to give people their due. Is that always important to you?
Well, the story isn't about me. I'm just the vessel. I'm just the one that has this platform that I can share a story. And so, when the Highland family, for example, I tried to work with them for more than a year before they were able to say yes, before they were willing to say, okay, we'll sit down. And it was hard, by far the hardest interview I've ever done. And for them too, of course. And again, I always took it so seriously. When people allow you into their lives, I wanted to do right by them. It wasn't just about telling people what happened. Anybody can do that. It was about capturing the pain and the loss and why it mattered. It's not just about what happened, but why does it matter? And that was really hard to never lose sight of. I didn't want to lose sight of why it was so important to tell this story. Not just because we had heard what happened, but it was so terrible and so catastrophic for this family that I just needed to do it right for them. When you do as many road trips as we did over the years to tell not just wildfire stories, although that was a huge portion of it, because there were so many stories to tell, you just get really close to people and you learn and you tell jokes all the way, and it makes it much more tolerable to go and tell these really heavy stories. It makes it easier. You have to kind of blow off the steam and tell jokes and listen to crazy music because you're going up to talk to people about terrible things that have been lost and things that aren't coming back, lives that have changed forever. So, to say that these people that I worked with were like my second family, it's not an exaggeration, it's not just a saying, it's true, because we spent so much time together and learned about each other and just learned how to have fun. News just kind of gets into your blood, and you hear people say that, but you can't really understand it until it's in you, and then everything kind of revolves around getting the story, telling the story, making the contacts, and making sure that you're giving everything you've got in that moment to that story. And news is so interesting. Every single day is a different story. And I think back, I've told thousands and thousands of stories, personal stories. Some fun, some really serious, some painful, and some that just needed to be told because nobody else was telling it. I'm an only child, and everyone who's ever known me knows I'm kind of an old soul. That's just who I am. And maybe I ended up in the wrong job because my nature isn't to put my whole self out there. But I loved everything about this job, and I'm just lucky that I got to do it for as long as I did. I think about all of the investigations that I've done and the really serious stories, and it's intimidating. It's really scary to go up against powerful people and make them uncomfortable and ask them questions that they don't want to answer. It's intimidating, and yet you have to do it anyway. And I learned how to do that over time.
You did. If you look back at some of the most impactful, I mean, I always think people have asked me, oh, is she the one who did the wolves?
Yeah.
I get asked that probably a handful of times I've been asked that over the last several years. Fire, land, big Northwest issues.
Yeah, it's true. This state, especially this side of the state, so often gets ignored, so often gets forgotten, so often has its needs placed down below everybody else. And that's such a shame, and it shouldn't be that way. And so these issues, while I just went off to tell a story, they turned into, another story, and then 10 stories, and then dozens of stories about the same issue because the issue continued to evolve. But sometimes the issue was stagnant. Sometimes it just didn't change. And that was why we were doing the story, because no matter how much these people shouted from the rooftops that their cattle are being eaten by wolves every other day, it didn't seem to matter. No one was listening. And so we've continued to try to tell that story because it deserves to be heard. And their side, their perspective, their loss is just as important as the people on the other side of the mountains. And people forget that sometimes. Politicians forget that. And so it's important that they're heard.
I do think we see that in news all the time.
All the time.
Right? Here's a bill that's going to affect all of Washington, and then they list 10 things that affects. You were always very intentional about picking and getting involved in subject matter that really does matter to Eastern Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised in Idaho, and then I moved over to the west side when I was in junior high and high school. So I have lived over in Western Washington in the Seattle area. So I understand what it's like to have lived there, and I didn't understand Eastern Washington. I just didn't, because people, if you haven't spent any time here, you just don't. And then I came here, and I went to college here. I just always really loved it here. I don't think I understood why necessarily back then when I knew I wanted to be here, when I went to college here. It just always felt like home. It always felt like a place that I wanted to be. And so as I told all these stories, it was very important to me that the people who are making decisions make the decisions based on everybody's input, because their livelihoods depend on it.
Their families.
Their whole family, their life, their business is impacted.
You went to the desk here at KREM full-time, what year?
Right before COVID. COVID was interesting. I anchored the news here for about 3 months by myself while Mark and Tom were at home, which was interesting. And then I went home for 3 months and anchored from my living room. Also interesting. Let's never do that again.
I don't think people understand what it's like to have a live production in your living room.
You couldn't possibly. And we didn't either. We didn't understand what it would be like to have a camera in our living room for 3 months. We just had to live around, the lights and the camera on a tripod all the time. And we just had to, it just became part of the living room. And, you know, oh, be careful, don't run into the camera. You know, how many times did I do a newscast and my dog was walking through the background? That's just, and I think we were all in that position, every single one of us, in news, outside of news. It was weird for everybody.
And then you came back in, and you work, I don't think people understand that you anchor a total of 2.5 hours minimum.
Every day?
Every day. That's a lot.
It can be, you know, it certainly can be, but it was always something that I took really seriously every single day. I never wanted to get jaded about covering the news. I never wanted to take it for granted either. And I hope that I didn't. I don't feel like I did. I treasured every moment that I sat here at this desk. And it was a privilege. And over the years, I kind of just realized this wasn't just my job. This was a special position and privilege that I got to hold on to and take care of for a while. And so I wanted to do that every single day.
Is there something there specifically in storytelling terms that is hard to leave?
There are a lot of issues. There are a lot of stories left to be told, things that are not yet resolved, things that are continuing right now, that I will always consider my stories. And so I will continue to, you know, talk to those people. They still reach out to me, and I'm sure that they still will. And then I will continue to pass it along to KREM and make sure that the story gets told in one way or another, because they're still important, and that's the role that we play here in news, is being that vessel to tell the story. And so I hope that continues. These issues still matter to me just as much as they did the first time I told the story. Back in 2017, we realized that the groundwater was contaminated and had been for a very long time, which meant that a lot of people had been drinking this water for years and years and years and had no idea, and probably suffered quite a few health consequences as a result. Didn't know it at the time. And so, you know, my job was to figure out what had happened, because it turned out the Air Force knew about it for a really long time, way before anybody else did. And so, you know, I had to go, that was going back to asking important people really tough questions and having to, you know, swallow that fear and just ask them the tough questions. And it was a really hard story to tell because the damage had already been done. And so now, and it's still ongoing. I mean, it's still there. It's always going to be there. So they've kind of circumvented some of the issues so that people have clean drinking water. But for a lot of people, the issue is the same. Private drinking wells, they're still contaminated. They're still trying to get them tested. Some people inside contamination zones, outside of contamination zones. It's become very complicated for a lot of people. And it's still something that people need to hear about and understand, because it shouldn't have happened.
Kyrgyzstan.
Boy, that was fun. You were supposed to go with me.
I was supposed to go. I remember.
I was brand new.
Right?
It was brand new. And then all of a sudden, they came to me and said, hey, how do you feel about going to Kyrgyzstan and helping deliver treats to troops? And also telling the story about the airbase there in Kyrgyzstan shutting down. It's where Fairchild crews had been going for years. And so they were moving on. And so that airbase, Manas, was being closed. So I went and told that story. And it was, what a trip to fly, you know, into Germany on KC-135. And then I got to go, we flew over Afghanistan. We got to see the Hindu Kush down below. We got to see an actual ground battle. And we saw them coming to our plane to refuel so they could go win the battle down below. I have a battle-flown flag that was given to me by the commander there. It was pretty cool.
There's no direct flight to Kyrgyzstan,
No,
let's put it that way.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
But it was really exciting. It was a privilege to even be considered, that they thought, hey, she's capable of doing this. I think we'll send her. And so I was excited that they trusted me again to tell that story and to do a good job. And so I always wanted to do right by everyone who trusted me here at KREM and everyone out in the community, and just make sure that I gave everything I had.
Would you like to share whatever you're comfortable with about your next steps?
You know, it was a hard decision. It's a very hard decision, but it's something that I had been thinking about for a while. And it's, you know, news is demanding. News is very demanding. And my family has very graciously sometimes been in the back seat when my job had to be coming first. And so it's time, you know, I'm a stepmom and I don't have that many more years to spend with these kiddos. And I really want to be present for that. It's really important to me, and they deserve it. And so I'm excited to spend more time with them. I'm still going to be here in Spokane. I'm still going to be, you know, I'm still going to be doing interviews. I'm working for a tech company. I'm excited to go learn new things and keep pursuing new goals. I'm not leaving Spokane. I love it here. This is always where I want to be.
Fast forward to your last show. Nope.
That's going to be really hard.
There's an energy that goes with a show that is hard to replicate.
Well, there's an energy, especially with Mark and Jeremy, that you can't replicate.
You can call it an energy.
It's something.
Yeah.
But you know, what a joy to have been part of that team for as long as I have. You know, we had so many fun moments. We told so many jokes. You know, I think we got to be ourselves, and news has changed enough over the years. Didn't used to be that way. It used to be really buttoned up. And now we get to have more fun. And that's what a cool privilege to be able to have been on both sides of that.
One of the comments, it may have been from me, but others as well, was like, oh my God, who's going to keep those two in line?
I don't know who's going to keep them in line. Good luck.
It's your problem now, Brad. They are unique people.
They're really good friends, which I think you can't replicate that. You can't fake it. They're just good friends. And that's awesome. That's awesome to see. And it's awesome to just get to be around them as they talk about the things that they enjoy doing, the activities that they love, mountain biking, skiing. And this is a great team to be a part of.
One last thing you want to tell Spokane or Eastern Washington, North Idaho, our viewing area?
I've loved being here. I've loved being a reporter and going out and telling important stories. I've loved meeting people and hearing what they have to say and what's important to them. I've enjoyed even the hard stuff, even the really, really hard days. I look back and it's been so rewarding as a career. And I'm just really grateful for the time that I got. When I'm going into that interview, I always know that it might not be a question that they want to hear. And I've already decided that it's something that needs to be asked. And so yes, I'm most of the time I'm intimidated. Most of the time I'm scared at what the reaction will be. And then I just have to remember, like, this is what I do. I can do this. Of course I can do this. It's just a question. And so not everyone appreciates when you come and ask those tough questions. Not everyone likes the story that you end up telling. But at the end of the day, there's someone on the other side who had something happen to them. And so that's why I'm there. There are multiple investigations that we've ended up doing that have changed lives. We opened the door, we turned on the light, and people realized that something that had happened never should have happened. And they made the decision that it wasn't going to happen again. Someone realized that was not okay. That was wrong, and something needs to change. And sometimes that's the power of journalism, is that all you have to do is go tell the story, even though it's really hard, and it will change lives. People are protected now. What happened to those kids won't happen again.
I don't believe you're ever intimidated.
I'm intimidated.
That sounds made up. Yeah, I find you intimidating?
I'm not.
You don't think so? You
I
don't
know
think
people
when
think
you
that,
walk
but
in
I'm
the-
not.
You don't think when you walk in the room, they're intimidated of you at all?
They shouldn't be.
No, it's sweet as pie.
I'm so nice.
Just ask me, people. Okay, so interesting. Interesting. All
But
right.
I do think that people, a lot of people are scared to ask questions, and so they shy away from it, and then it ends up not getting asked.
Yep.
And so someone has to ask it.
That's really what investigation is.
It is.
It's sometimes caring enough, having the platform, and making the effort to ask the uncomfortable questions.
It's like that quote, speak your mind, speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. It's important.
What I always took from it is that you, and I believe in this strongly as a journalist, you made it, as tough as it was, or sickening as some of these stories are, or hard to take, it was their moment to tell their story. I always tell people, they say, how do you not cry a lot in the moment? And I say, I cry later because it's not my moment.
Yeah. Yeah, you do cry. I've cried about lots of stories that we've had to cover. You try to hold it together as much as you can, and you recognize that it's their experience to share, and to let them be able to do that, not to be a distraction, but just to be the person who absorbs what is being doled out, and then go back, have that emotion, break down. I did that all the time. And then remember that emotion, because if it's affecting me that way, it will affect others that way. And so it's a story that needs to be told.